Welcome to the Dining Etiquette Workshop presented by the Clarion University Center for Career and Professional Development. My name is Erin. I am the Assistant Director and I will be leading you through today's workshop. Let's start with the invitation. RSVP. What does that mean? It means please reply. Let me know if you're coming or not. And you want to respond promptly. Pay attention to the response deadline. You also want to respond according to the invitation. Maybe that's a response card, maybe they want a response via email, a handwritten note, a phone call, but follow the directions. Don't ask for permission to bring a guest. Unless it specifies John Smith and guest, or Jane Doe and guest, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so and family, don't ask for permission to bring a guest. You also want to take any sort of special needs into consideration prior to the event. So for example, if you have dietary restrictions, you would want to make the host or hostess aware of your nutritional needs prior to the event so you don't show up and say, oh, well, there's nothing here for me to eat. I can't eat gluten, or I can't have this, or I'm allergic to peanuts, or I'm allergic to seafood. So letting the host or hostess know in advance will allow them to prepare. It will also allow you to prepare knowing what may or may not be available and for you to take some responsibility there if it is necessary. It's also going to allow you to make a decision as to whether or not you will be able to attend. And don't be a no-show. If you say you're going to go, show up. Only cancel if there's some sort of an emergency, an illness, or death in the family. And if you can't cancel in advance, then at least follow up with your host or hostess after the event, hoping that the event went well and making them aware that you had an emergency and were unable to attend due to the emergency so that they don't think you're a no-show. You also want to dress appropriately for the event. The invitation should provide a hint. Is it formal? Is it casual? And if you're not sure, place a phone call or an email. Arriving. Arrive at the event promptly, but not too early. So essentially, you want to be fashionably late. What does that mean? It means no later than 8 minutes past the start time. You also want to be careful that you don't arrive too early. That is considered very poor manners and could put your host or hostess in an awkward situation. If it's a business function and there is a check-in table, you want to make sure that you go to the check-in table and that you actually check in and get your name tag or whatever other things that they need to have taken care of. If there's a cocktail hour or cocktail period, have mix and mingle conversation, meaning actually walk up to individuals and have a conversation. You want to meet and greet your table mates if it's at a restaurant or at a table. Converse with guests to both your left and right, making sure you include everyone. Don't know what to talk about? There's an awesome way that you can do that. You can prepare in advance a list of questions and think about those in your mind. Well, where did you go to college? Where have you gone on vacation? Do you like to play sports? Do you like to go to such and such a place? Have you been to this restaurant before? Do you have a recommendation of the food? Do you like to go to wherever and shop? Or what's your favorite place to get this? Or a list of questions that will help you in getting to know individuals at your table, and it also gives you something to think about in advance. If you're someone who knows that this is an area in which you struggle, prepare, prepare, prepare. Also, don't change place cards. The host or hostess could have a very strategic method behind where your card is placed, and you don't want to mess that up. That could be bad. Place any personal belongings under your chair to be courteous of wait staff, and if that is a coat rack is an option, you want to definitely use a coat rack as well for any coats or jackets or anything like that. Don't lean the chair against the table to indicate that it is in use. Instead, use your napkin as a way to indicate the chair is in use. Wait to sit down until you receive a host signal, meaning they say, okay, let's sit down. Or sometimes it's simply just a discreet, you notice that the host or hostess is seated. Sometimes there's an announcement. You want to make sure that you take your cues from the host or hostess. Just an interesting tip that I learned is that you want to enter your chair from the left. Some general table conduct. This might sound much like what you've heard before, but when you're at the table, sit up straight. Put your hands and wrist in your lap or on the edge of the table. Elbows off the table, everyone. Keep your elbows close to your body as if you're holding a book. Wait for the host to begin. If there is not a host, meaning it is some sort of a business event or maybe it's a gathering of some sort, you want to look to the most senior person. When that person begins, the rest of the group can also begin. If there is a program, you want to be sure to check to see if there is any sort of an invocation. It's sometimes very awkward if you've started on your fruit cup or salad and then all of a sudden you notice that there's prayer going on. So you want to check to make sure that you're prepared. You want to always pass food to the right and remember to take modest portions. This is not the Last Supper, right? Especially if this is any sort of an interview or networking setting, you want to have very small portions. Remember, you're not really in that situation to eat. You're in that situation to network and get a better understanding and really start building relationships. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to. Chew with your mouth closed and don't talk with your mouth full. Oh, I'm really sounding like my mom, right? And you also want to be really careful of food sounds, right? So no puppy or slurping. You want to be really conscientious of any sort of crunchy chewing, any sort of slurping, and you want to take that into consideration when you're choosing food off the menu. If you don't get a choice, just be super, super careful. It's much better to avoid eating a food that's going to cause you embarrassment with making slurping sounds than it is to skip. So you want to be really aware of that. We've all been at the table, right? Where you sit down and the napkin is super fancy and you think, okay, now what do I do? Where do I begin? So let's talk about navigating the napkin for just a moment. If you're at a restaurant, you want to place your napkin on your lap as soon as everyone is seated. If you're at home or at somebody else's home, wait for your host or hostess. Unfold the napkin all the way. If it's extra large, fold it in half. Place your napkin on the chair if you need to excuse yourself from the table. And when you are finished, loosely place your napkin to the left of your plate. If you happen to drop your napkin, it's okay to ask for a replacement. The cover. We've seen it, right? Informal, formal, very fancy. It's everything at place setting except for dessert in most formal dining settings. The utensils, a nifty trick is to remember that they are set in the order in which they will be used. Work from the outside of the plate in. Silverware above the place setting is for dessert. If you think about getting confused over, is this cup mine? Is this plate yours? Is this yours? Is this mine? If you hold your hands out and with your right hand form the letter D for drink and your left hand form the letter B for bread, that will help you in knowing, is that my bread plate? Is that my drink? Because your left and right hand form B and D. B is for bread in the left, D is for drink on the right. Nifty trick. I hope you're all creating your B's and D's with your hands. And that will help you to know, okay, this is my drink, it's on the right. This is my bread plate, it's on the left. The other thing to think about is BMW. Think fancy eating and think fancy car. B for bread, M for Maine, W for water. BMW. When it comes to glassware, it could be placed in front of the dinner plate above the knives and spoon. Again, think D for drinks. When it comes to your water glass, you want to just pick the water glass up at the bottom of the bowl and top of the stem. A wine glass is by the stem for white, bowl for red. It's okay to say no thank you to wine by gently placing your hand over the glass. If they've poured the wine for you already and you don't want to consume it, just just leave it. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. Don't make a big deal about it. Just don't drink it. This is often the most overwhelming part of a formal dining situation. If you can remember B&D or BMW, that will at least get you started. And remember, outside in. Outside in. All right, it's time to dine and act fine. Thinking about the different components of the meal, we are going to go through setting by setting. So bread and butter, one piece at a time. And you want to pass to the right, starting with the person closest with you. Pass to the right and just take one piece of bread or one dinner roll, or you can totally skip the bread if you don't do bread, you don't eat bread. It's okay to say no. When you take your bread, so say it's a dinner roll, you want to just break a piece of the bread off and butter each piece individually. Sometimes you have a large piece of butter in the center of the table where you need to choose from and just take a bit of the butter and put it on the plate. Sometimes they're individual butter packets, but you always want to just break off a piece of bread and butter it individually. The days of taking your roll, breaking it in half, buttering the left side, buttering the right side, and then taking a big bite, this is not the situation for that. That's more of Thanksgiving dinner with the family type behavior. Once you have used your knife, leave it on the bread plate, not the table. Time for salad. Dressings and condiments are always passed to the right, and be aware of your surrounding. There's always that person at the table who doesn't realize the ranch dressing is right beside him or her. It's okay to say, Bob, would you mind passing around the dressing so we could get started on salads? Especially if there's someone who maybe doesn't use a dressing, or they're not, a condiment person. They may not even be aware of that. So it's your job at a dining etiquette or a dining situation to remember your etiquette and be aware of your surrounding. Even if you don't want the dressing, someone else may, so you should get it passing. Remember, when it comes to salt and pepper, that they are married. If they are requested, meaning, Bob, could you please pass me the pepper? You always pass salt and pepper together. They're married. Don't separate them. That wouldn't be very nice, would it? Soup. Oh, soup can be the challenge, right? You want to use the large spoon on the far right. Typically, it looks a little bit like a saucer. It has a little bit of a bowl type shape to it. And hold it like a pencil. Spoon away from you, almost like a Ferris wheel, right? Dip in at 12 o'clock. Drag the spoon across the edge of the bowl. Bring the soup to you. Don't bend over. Sip from the side of the spoon, not the tip. To rest from eating, put the spoon in the soup bowl. When you are done, put the soup spoon on the saucer or plate beneath the bowl. If there are crackers involved with your soup, you want to break the crackers into small pieces instead of a large chunk of cracker or bread. It's okay to break off small pieces of cracker at a time and put in the bowl. Now, I know sometimes I've seen people do it where they take maybe like a saltine packet of crackers and they break them all up and they open it up and dump it into the soup. Not proper etiquette. Again, same as the bread, one piece at a time so that you look like you know about your manners and your etiquette. If the salad is after the soup, the fork is on the far right. Sometimes the salad can be after the main meal as a palate cleanser. In that case, the salad fork is closest to the plate. If using a salad fork, it is okay to cut lettuce with the fork. Cherry tomatoes are fork over the tomato and cut with the knife, or don't eat them. Olives are eaten whole. If there are pits, use the fork to get the pit out. However food goes in is how that object comes out. If you are resting, leave your fork on the salad plate. Remember, once a utensil is used, it never goes back on the table. Everyone's favorite part, dessert, right? You want to place your fork on the plate between bites and spoon on a saucer. If there's coffee, pass the cream and sugar if they are closest to you. Point the handle toward the person receiving it, and don't short stop, meaning if Bob requested the creamer and he's 3 people down, then we pass the creamer to Bob first, and then the creamer needs to make it the whole way around again. If you're having tea instead of coffee, don't wind the tea bag string around the spoon and try to squeeze everything out that you can of the tea bag. You want to just take the tea bag out and put it on the saucer and be done with it. Main course eating styles. Let's dig in. There are 2 very different types of eating styles, American style and continental style. Just to give you a little brief overview of the 2 different styles, Americans and Canadians are typically the only people in the world who use the American style, and this is sometimes known as the zigzag method. You want to hold your utensils like a pencil. Your fork is in your non-dominant hand. Your knife is in the dominant hand. Cut up to 3 bites at a time. And we're slicing here, not sawing. So be really careful that we slice and don't saw. Once we cut, we switch the fork to the dominant hand and put the knife down. You want to spear your piece of food, bring it to your mouth, tines up. And you want to be really careful here. Look at our picture where we actually have the food, the utensils on the plate. We're not ramping up here. So the actual knife and fork are on the plate for resting and also for finished. So for American style, the knife is at the top, the fork is at the bottom, and when we are finished, they become closer together. Now notice for continental style, it's slightly different. For continental style, in the early 19th century, Europeans ate just as we do now, the zigzag method. But around 1850, the upper class stopped shifting their forks back and forth, and the continental or European style of eating became fashionable. A French etiquette book of the time remarks, "If you wish to eat in the latest mode favored by fashionable people, you will not change your fork to your right hand after you have cut your meat, but raise it to your mouth in your left hand." Now that's implying that your left hand is your non-dominant hand. So for continental style, the fork remains in the non-dominant hand and the knife in the dominant hand. You cut 1 bite at a time. Fork is tines down, and you make cut with the knife while you pivot the wrist. Bring your fork to your mouth, tines down. Sounds so fancy, right? When it comes to resting position for your utensils, that is definitely different than the American style. So it's the knife and the fork cross, tines down, and then for continental style, they come close together, tines down. So American style is tines up, continental style is tines down. When the course is complete, you can place any utensils meant for that course on the plate, whether or not they were used. For example, if during the salad course you don't use your salad knife, it still goes on the plate at the end of the course. If you don't put it on the plate, the waiter will do it for you. The golden rule for both styles is eating whichever style you choose. Be consistent. Avoid switching back and forth between courses. I will say that typically there are no dining etiquette police. This is simply an opportunity for you to become aware that there are 2 different dining styles, and you can have a little bit of fun with it. If you're out with friends and you've had this workshop, you can say, are you doing American style? Are you doing continental style? And it's fun to test your knowledge when you are out at a restaurant. Which fork do I use? Which drink is mine? It's definitely good to put it into practice and to be aware that these 2 very different styles exist. Difficult food. As I mentioned when we were talking about how you consume different foods, such as cherry tomatoes or olives with pits. If you're at a job interview, my best advice is just to not eat them, avoid them. So, some other challenging foods might be spaghetti. You can cut it with the side of your fork and twirl a few strings around your fork, or if you have a spaghetti spoon, roll it in the bowl of the spaghetti spoon. Corn on the cob, again, if it's a job interview or some sort of, event like that, avoid corn on the cob. However, maybe you're at a function where, it's a work function, or you're at a conference and corn on the cob, everyone's eating it. Only butter a small portion and eat each row like a typewriter. That means the whole way across. Are you wondering what a typewriter is? I hope not. Finger foods like sandwiches, use both hands and catch any drops on your plate, and you can use a fork to pick it up. So for example, if you're having that club sandwich there and a piece of the bacon falls out, you can use your fork to still eat that bacon. No bacon left behind, right? Always watch for dripping butter, whether it's corn on the cob or a sandwich or maybe some other type of a meal. When it comes to shrimp cocktail, sometimes you will have a cocktail fork. So pick it up by the tail. So pick the shrimp up by the tail and use your cocktail fork to remove the shrimp. Just a little tip. If you're picking the shrimp up by the tail, if you squeeze the tail and kind of loosen it, it makes using that cocktail fork a lot easier. Watermelon, okay, if I'm with my family in the backyard, I am eating watermelon in a very casual way. I've got it maybe on a plate and I'm taking bites of it and I've got watermelon juice everywhere, right? But in public or with a professional event like networking or a picnic or a company event or conference, we want to be professional. So we can use a fork and a knife and discreetly drop any seeds through the cup of your hand and then drop them on the plate. Now, my kids would be having watermelon seed spitting contest. Again, perfectly fine for the backyard, not so much for the company picnic. Certain foods like berries, like whole strawberries, are considered finger food. Others are considered a bowl food and you want to use a spoon. So berries like blueberries, black raspberries, they're smaller and you would use a spoon for that. But strawberries would definitely be a finger food. You could certainly use that. However, if they've done sort of a fruit cup and it's cut sliced strawberries and slices of cantaloupe or honeydew melon, then you would use a fork if it's able to be forked or a spoon. French onion soup. Oh, again, an amazingly delicious food, right? But super hard to eat. Don't order it at your job interview. Even if it's at a restaurant and you love it and it's your favorite food ever, don't order French onion soup. Aside from the fact that the onion is going to leave you less than favorable breath, it's a really challenging food to eat. But if you're at a host or hostess event at someone's house and they serve French onion soup and you're thinking, oh no, what do I do? You want to spoon cut the cheese, right? We want to cut the cheese. I know, you're giggling, right? So use the spoon to cut the cheese. Avoid any crackers with it and just take very small bites. Again, remembering how we eat soup, we want to use the soup spoon, cut the cheese, pour the spoon over the side of the bowl, and bring the spoon to you and consume it off the side of the spoon, not the tip. For fried chicken, follow whatever the host or hostess does. So if they're using their fingers, go for it. If they're using a fork and knife, use a fork and knife. So follow the lead there. An artichoke, you want to work from the outside in, one leaf at a time. Artichoke is actually considered a finger food until you get to the heart. Again, my best tip when it comes to challenging foods, if it's at a job interview, just avoid these foods. Go with the simplest food possible to eat in a job interview, knowing full well you're really not going to be doing much eating. You're mostly going to be doing talking. So anything that's going to require you a lot of chewing, you want to avoid it. There are some table taboos. You want to avoid drinking in excess, so moderate consumption. If it's a job interview or a networking event, my rule of thumb is none. If it is sort of maybe a company get together, or you're already hired and you're networking, or you're at a conference, one or two is perfectly enough. You don't want to drink in excess. When it comes to sharing food, don't share bites of food and don't ask to taste someone else's food or offer a taste of your food to someone else. It is inappropriate to share when others are at the table. It is appropriate, to share when others at the table are also willing to share. So, for example, if you and a bunch of friends are out for a formal dinner and you decide that you don't really want a full serving of dessert, instead, you'd like to share. If your friend decides that they would also like a piece of cheesecake, for example, then you can get one slice of cheesecake and share it. However, always request additional small plates and clean utensils for dividing the shared food. Don't use a toothpick or any other item to remove food. Take a drink of water or excuse yourself to go to the restroom if you just can't budge that piece of broccoli. Don't put lipstick or fix your hair or any other perfume. Don't do that at the table. And it's also not appropriate to ask for a doggy bag. And if the host or hostess says, "Would you like to take this with you?" It's you don't want to refuse. You always want to say yes, even if you don't think you want to. You don't want to refuse it. When it comes to your cell phone, it should be off or on silence. Under absolutely, positively no circumstance should you place a call or receive a call or text or receive a text while you are dining. The same goes for anything that is involved with your phone. You don't want to be taking photos and posting on Instagram. You don't want to be making tweets. You don't want to be, whatever. Just your phone shouldn't be out. You don't want to give anyone the idea that the person on the phone or object in the phone is more important than the individual sitting with you. If there is no way to avoid making or receiving a call, just excuse yourself from the table and take your call outside of the dining room. So, for example, if you have children and you have a babysitter, it's you might not want to turn your phone off, but you just make the host or hostess aware. Oh, we have a sitter tonight. I'm going to have my phone out in case they need to call. It's definitely something to take into consideration. If you have a situation where you have a buffet, you want to definitely know how to navigate that buffet. So, because they are a new trend, it's necessary to have a planned approach before going to eat at a buffet. You want to avoid over serving and overeating. You also want to keep lines moving and keep the event program on schedule. So, scout the buffet. Is there one line? Are there two lines? Don't go to the buffet until your table is called and take your position at one end. Never start serving yourself from the middle of the line. I probably don't need to say that, but don't do it. If it's a buffet where you serve yourself, again, portion size, portion size, portion size. Don't heap food on your plate. Take a small sampling of the food selections as is permissible to return for a second helping. And don't perform a taste test. Do ask the server and return if you like it. And don't mix utensils and leave the serving spoon or tongs next to the platter or dish where you found them. Once everyone appears to be served, it is okay to go back for seconds. Always get a new plate for health and sanitation reasons and for convenience. Be courteous. Don't forget to say please and thank you to the staff, buffet line servers, and other personnel who attempt to make your dining experience a pleasant one. If this is a lunch or dinner interview, here are some tips. When it comes to the location, if the host asks where you would like to dine, simply reply with, "Where would you suggest?" This helps you from choosing an option that may be higher in price range or lower in price range than the host attended. You may also want to review menu options online ahead of time. This helps to show confidence and decision making when ordering. Avoid ordering more courses than the host: soup, appetizer, salad, dessert, wine, whatever. Again, you always want to avoid alcohol at an event like this, and if the rest of the group orders dessert, it's okay for you to participate in that as well. You will be doing more talking than eating, and you don't want to be wearing your lunch during the afternoon interviews. So be really careful of messy foods and foods that are hard to eat. It is perfectly acceptable to substitute mineral water for wine. Even if the rest of the people that you're sitting with in an interview have ordered alcohol, it's okay for you to say that you would just like mineral water or just, water with lemon or whatever you prefer that's non-alcoholic. So, I mentioned earlier about conversation. Prepare questions ahead of time to help you have a chance to eat. So, how long have you been with the company? Well, what do you enjoy most about your position? What was one of the most challenging things you encountered when you first started here? How would you describe the culture of the company? How is this position evaluated? How will I know what you think of my performance? How do coworkers view this position? And so much more. Trying to find common interests like sports, gardening, or other hobbies will help you also in having conversations. Avoid anything that could be considered controversial, politics, religion, whatever. Just avoid those. But having a plan of action in advance will certainly help you to maintain your professionalism and also get a chance to eat. Always, always, always stay professional and avoid offering for payment or the tip. Again, this is for an interview situation. There are some different cultural considerations. If you find yourself dining in a culturally diverse situation, do your homework before you dine. Some cultures, it's very rude to refuse food. Different hands, right hand, left hand, different noises. Some cultures you want to make noises. Some cultures it's rude to clean up your plate. You want to make sure that you leave a little bite. So just know if you are dining in a situation where there might be cultural considerations, to do your homework before you go. As always, don't overstay your welcome, extend your thanks as you leave, and follow up with a note to your host or hostess within a few days. Mostly 2. It's also perfectly acceptable if you know the email is preferred mode of communication to send an email. However, there is something really nice about getting a nice handwritten card that says thank you in the mail a couple days after the event. It shows professionalism and good manners and that you were a gracious guest. So hopefully these tips will help you the next time you find yourself in a professional dining situation. If you have additional questions or additional assistance is needed in maybe a specific situation, feel free to contact us at careers@clarion.edu. Best of luck on your dining etiquette adventures.